Very good evening to you. Thanks for clicking on to the UK and Europe video blog for today. It's the 18th of November, and we are fairly rattling through the month of November, folks, and we continue to see a pretty persistent pattern, particularly so across the majority of the continent, the mainland of the continent, where we're seeing this high pressure continuing to block. We're seeing, of course, foggy, cool conditions across parts of Germany, through Poland, always a little cooler over in the eastern part of the continent, from Russia down through to Turkey as well. Interestingly enough, the UK, we're still seeing some of those those fronts be suppressed more towards the west, towards Ireland and the western parts of the UK mainland, thanks to the fact that we've got that block and high pressure. And I'm going to continue to suggest to you folks, pay attention to the persistency of this blocking area of high pressure. Of course, if this blocking area of high pressure wasn't there, we would be seeing wind and rain persistently. A few days in between, we would be seeing high pressure and control, providing us with cooler, frostier nights. But the fact is, folks, what we're seeing is the persistency of the milder conditions. We're seeing very little in the way of overnight frost. The reason being is we're not seeing those fronts get pushed eastwards. They're lingering. They're managing to get basically over Ireland as well as parts of the UK, lingering cloud cover, some showers, plenty of clouds, like I say, and where the clear skies are, we are seeing cooler temperatures. We're seeing patchy frost develop. But under a normal circumstance where we don't have the high pressure over Europe, we would be seeing fronts push through areas of low pressure centres, of course, of tighter isobars producing gale force winds. That would move through. We would be seeing a break in between. In between each area of low pressure, you would see a bubble of high pressure, perhaps providing a day or so of more settled, calmer, brighter conditions, of course, at night time, frosty conditions. But the problem is, like I say, is the fronts are getting backed up against this ridge of high pressure, and therefore it's a very stubborn, very monotonous, quite boring type of pattern. It's frustrating almost, the amount of clouds we're seeing in between some sunshine, but we're not getting any refreshing cold air like you would typically see in the month of November. But I'm starting to see the changes take place, looking at the European as well as the GFS model, and into next week it looks as if we're going to be starting to see the high pressure almost weaken, then build in strength again. We're seeing troughs dipping into parts of Scandinavia, northern parts of Europe, and it's getting then pushed back up. The high pressure itself is almost like it's kind of saying, no, I'm wanting to be persistent. I'm wanting to hold off all this weather off the Atlantic, the colder weather off to the north. But what we're going to be seeing is the high pressure itself is going to fight against the alteration, the change in the season. As cold air then swells, it intensifies, it then breaks down these bubbles of high pressure, this warmth that shouldn't be there at this time of year. The persistency of the pattern tells me that when the cold air does eventually arrive, could it last as long as what we're seeing with the high pressure, with the settled, monotonous pattern? Are we going to see, by the midpoint of December, the persistency in that trough over the western part of the UK, as the high pressure builds over Greenland in the North Atlantic? That, of course, means a negative North Atlantic oscillation. Will that be persistent as the ridge that we're seeing over Europe at the moment? But certainly underneath the core of the high pressure over Germany, Poland, even into parts of the Alpine countries of Austria and Switzerland, we're seeing that stagnant air, and that, of course, is producing fog. It's producing cooler conditions because of the cloud and the fog, but also that stable air, no wind. We're seeing the persistency in the fog and the mist, so it's probably just as stubborn for folks across Germany and Poland and central countries, the Czech Republic, places like that. But what I'm seeing is the chance for areas of low pressure to then start to dig in. Next week we could be seeing changes, and when we do start to see those areas of low pressure themselves cross and get closer to the UK, we'll see the front, heavy rain, strong winds, get pushed eastwards. What we need to start watching for, and this is what I was concerned about, is that on the back side of these areas of low pressure, if you can get these centres of low pressure to push east of the UK, then that wind field then pulls in colder air from the north and northwest. And what I am going to be starting to watch out for is just how cold the air will be on the back side of these areas of low pressure. As for Arctic high pressure and persistency in cold air, I'm still not seeing that, and I don't believe it will happen until we get into December. But what I will say is this: I do think we're going to be starting to see a change to colder air by the end of next week into the following week, as we start to knock on the door of December. But I think the persistency in the pattern will be such that it's going to remain unsettled, and we aren't going to see the big cold spell that so many have been anticipating at the end of this month. We might see a turn to colder for sure, yes, but the type of pattern we're in at the moment is going to be driven, that colder air will be driven by an unsettled Atlantic pattern, and that means to say the colder that we will see will be a colder air that these areas of low pressure pull down as they push east. So of course we're going to see a milder push of air ahead of the front, and then of course a colder push of air as that centre of low pressure then pushes east, pulls down the colder air. But next week, more unsettled, wet, windy conditions, but certainly over the next several days it's going to be a mild weekend. We're going to be seeing the persistency in those fronts struggling to really get anywhere east of the UK, and that means to say we're going to be seeing damper, cloudier conditions in the west. We're going to be seeing breaks. It's going to be a sunshine and shower cloud cover pattern over the course of the weekend. Temperatures mild, 11 to 12, maybe even 14 Celsius. So the persistency in the pattern remains the same on more unsettled conditions by next week. So I hope that isn't too much of a mouthful for you this evening. Hope you have a terrific weekend, and stay safe wherever you are. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.